Hi, I'd like to show you a film called Let's Go to Prison. Give me a like and let's get started. John Leshitsky has just got out of prison and the first thing he wants to do is buy a gun. If he got a nickel for doing time, he'd already have 3. When he was 8 years old, he stole a van with a big check in it. What he didn't realize was that he couldn't cash it at the bank. Judge Biederman found him guilty and sentenced him to 7 years in juvenile detention. It was there that the boy became a hardened criminal. At the age of 18, he robbed a Brinks truck. To scare off the security guards, he fired all his bullets into the air. If stupidity were a crime, he'd get life. But Judge Biederman only gave him 4 years. At 23, he was out for half a year, but went back to prison for stealing a police car. Now that he's free, he's plotting his revenge on Judge Nelson Biederman. He's prepared to do anything to get his revenge. But it turns out that the old man died 3 days ago. Later, John sees a newspaper article about Judge Biederman's son opening a memorial. Looks like John found someone to get revenge on. John notices Nelson in the car park before the ceremony. Since his father's death, Nelson has become the head of his father's foundation. While the younger Biederman reads a speech from the stage, John breaks into his car. He empties his emergency inhaler and remembers to steal all the money. He ends up spitting in his coffee, twice, and leaves quietly. Later, Nelson is surprised by the disgusting foam in his cappuccino. The judge's son turns out to be a spoilt rich guy. He wastes money and yells at the board to get him a soda. That puts him in a good mood.
People, don't you know?
He sings along to the stereo and doesn't notice that John's van is following him. But suddenly a hyperventilating Nelson realizes that his inhaler isn't working. In a panic, he shushes passers-by and runs into a pharmacy. He smashes the counter but can't say a word. He's obviously another junkie. The owners think he is a thief and the pharmacist's wife pulls out a shotgun. But Biederman has already found the right inhaler and proudly displays it.
Tiny gun!
To defuse the situation, John shoots into the air. The owner thinks it's a junkie starting a shootout. Nelson runs out to the sound of bullets, but his face is caught on a security camera. John's revenge is successful. Now, Junior Biederman is in the same meat grinder that Judge Biederman put John in. Nelson calls Saul, but he secretly resents the brash son of his late boss. The board advises Nelson to plead guilty and resign. Of course, they could call the governor and Nelson would be released immediately, but do they want that? At the trial, Biederman approaches the judge. She knew his father. Nelson has a bunch of experienced lawyers. Why waste time in court? But the judge hates upstarts like Biederman. She'll try him to the fullest extent of the law. The jury is made up of 12 people who Nellie doesn't think are the brightest. And he's not far wrong.
Before my daddy died, he taught me one thing. See, the thumb goes away, comes back.
Saul makes a lame speech to the jury. They unanimously find Nelson guilty. The judge sends him to prison for 3 to 5 years. The trial is over. John watches as the son of the judge who ruined his life is sent to prison. There he is beaten, tortured, and humiliated. Shame John won't be at the party. John is visited by junkies who want to buy something illegal. When you've done time, you can smell the cops from a mile away, but he sells them the stuff anyway, so he can go to jail with Biederman and get his own back. John haggles with the judge, and they agree on 3 to 5 years if the judge sends him to Rossore prison. John takes the same bus as Biederman. He meets an acquaintance and offers to share a cell. Nellie is happy to meet at least one friend.
Gang members really giving me the cold shoulder.
It's inexcusable.
The warden asks if there are any innocent people in the line. They are released immediately. One prisoner raises his hand but is hit by a guard with a club.
That was my little joke.
Every complaint in this prison is punished. The guard recognizes Johnny immediately. For a small fee, he puts him in a cell with Biederman. John has 3 wonderful years ahead of him. The prisoners welcome Nelson like fresh meat. He found himself in a tiny cell measuring 2 by 2 meters. He is so frightened that he immediately cries. Joan advises him to hide his weakness in prison. It's better to make an angry expression. Nelson puts on a tough face, but it's more like a constipated face. In the canteen, Johnny shows the newcomer the most dangerous gang, the white supremacists and their leader, Leonard. He soon starts a fight and stabs his opponent right on Nelson's table. The guard hits the newcomer with his baton and asks who started the fight. John takes the hint with his eyes. And Nellie immediately snitches on Leonard. Uh-oh. Johnny reprimands his cellmate. You don't squeal in prison.
I mean, haven't you seen any prison movies?
Nelson gets the hint wrong. In prison, you can only trust your cellmate. In fact, the rule is different. Trust no one. The scariest thing for Nelson is going to the shower. There he's immediately approached by the biggest black man in the place. It's Barry, the leader of the G-Lords. But Johnny tells him to back off. It's his fish. It's worked so far.
Did you have to stick your finger up my ass?
Nope, but it happened.
At a meeting with his lawyer, Biederman asks him to get him out of jail at any cost. But he has no money left. He's been fired from his own father's foundation. He can't even buy a soda. John pays the prisoners to pick on Nelson, and the canteen has been putting all sorts of nasty things in his food, and Barry has his eye on him and follows him in the showers. One day he asks Johnny what Nelson's price is, and Johnny sells his cellmate without a second thought. John leaves Nelson alone in his cell. He'll be all right if he puts on a tough face, but the guard thought he was constipated. For a bribe, the guard forgets to close the bars, and Biederman is kidnapped. He's thrown into Big Barry's cell. He is the next to enter and closes the curtain. The big man offers him a glass of wine, which he distills himself in a shoot. To convince Nelson, Barry threatens him with a shiv. Nelson gives in and admits that Barry is quite handsome. G-Lord puts on some romantic music and asks Nelson to sit next to him. Nelson is now his property, but Barry is romantic and will not be rushed, as they have many years of imprisonment ahead of them. Today, an Eskimo kiss is enough, and the two men rub noses. 3 months later, Nelson describes his difficult fate to a pen pal. Just then, someone pisses on him. It's a message from Leonard. He's getting out of the hole today and is waiting to meet him. Joni reassures him. At best, he'll beat Nelson every day for all 3 years. The inmates place bets on how the newcomer will be killed. But naive Nelson only wants to apologize. He approaches the gang leader and begins his speech, but only gets a fork in his leg. And then a second. Are they even now? Leonard thinks he's as brave as his father. He killed him, by the way, just like he's going to kill Nelson. Only Barry is nice to him. In the shower, he helps Nelson soap his head. John has found a way for a cellmate to keep his life. All he has to do is get a single cell. He hits the guard and blames it on Nelson. He's sent to the hole, but the conditions are terrible. Every minute seems like an eternity to Nelson, and he starts to go crazy. Finally, he is released.
How long was I in there?
2 days.
Nelson can't stand life in prison any longer. He wants to solve the problem with poison. He buys a product called boat cleaner from a local chemist. In a letter to his pen pal, Nelson complains about the terrible prisoners. He bids the boy farewell. And finally, he advises him and his classmates never to go to prison. Johnny notices a gang heading for their cell and wisely goes for a walk. Leonard enters the cell and douses the snitch with lighter fluid. Nelson tries to escape, but a boat cleaner falls out of his pocket. Leonard thinks it's something illegal, and without a second thought uses it on himself. Nelson drags the dead ringleader out into the corridor. Now the prisoners are afraid of him, but Joni feels sorry for the guy. Now he's looking at 20 years. But technically, Nelson didn't lay a finger on Leonard. In the canteen, a prisoner comes up to Nelson and tells him that the White Kingdom is now in his favor. He even gives the new boss a greeting card. He checks his authority and chases the black prisoner away. It's crazy. Now everyone's afraid of Nelson. In the toilet, he meets Big Barry. Now Nelson is ready to stand up for himself and strikes first. But he only breaks Barry's heart. He's ready to strangle Nelson.
Is this how you treat someone you love?
Nelson feels sorry for the big guy and wants to hug him, but then his gang bursts in and kicks Barry. As the new leader, Nelson stops them. The guards come running at the sound of the fight, but find John guilty. Bad karma. They send him to the hole. 3 weeks later, he is released from the SHU. Now Nelson has the respect of the whole prison. The inmates eat his outlandish antics like popcorn. He even put on a musical. In private, he admits he owes John a debt of gratitude. It was John who gave him back his self-respect. Now he's tasted a man's love and is happier than ever. How did John let this happen? Not so long ago, he had Biederman completely under control, and tomorrow is his parole hearing. Barry helps Nelson prepare for it and shaves him. But in his heart, he's sad to see Nelson go. Johnny congratulates Nelson and gives him a parting gift, a can of his favorite soda. But why is it open? Nelson takes a sniff, but Joni scolds him for his disbelief. He takes the first sip. Nelson trusts his friend and drains the can to the bottom.
The taste of freedom!
But he immediately falls unconscious, and Johnny begins to vomit. In the morning, Biederman is taken straight to a hearing. He promises to fight for his ideals on the outside, except that he has a white power tattoo on his forehead. The commission denies him parole and puts his file between Charlie Manson and the Unabomber. Nelson returns angry as hell and attacks John. Biederman no longer believes in his tricks. He has to confess. John is only avenging his father, Judge Biderman. The fight is broken up by the guards. Why weren't they called? They set up a death match for Friday in the courtyard, and to keep the gladiators from doing anything stupid, they put a guard on them. John turned this loser into a psychopathic killer. Now they're locked in the same cage. The prisoners place their bets. It's going to be an epic fight, and the guards try to predict the outcome. The fighters await the final hour, but Nelson has a visitor. It's Barry. The commission has decided that he's changed, and it's all thanks to Nelson. But he doesn't want to be free without his fish.
The only way that I'm getting out of here is in a body bag.
Then it better be a body bag for two, goddammit.
But he promises to do something for Barry. He better call Saul and tell him that his son will take control of the foundation. Yes, he adopted someone in prison. That's when Barry bursts into the office.
What the hell you doing in my office, bitch?
The warden finds out about the fight. Even he bets $50 on the newcomer. On the appointed day, the fighters enter the ring. The crowd welcomes them like true stars. There's only one rule.
Whoever dies first loses.
Nelson has his shiv at the ready, and Johnny takes 3 at once. But after hitting Nelson, the blade breaks. Biederman has made an armor vest out of number plates. Then they pull out their deadly weapons, boat cleaners. But at the crucial moment, the friends decide not to kill each other. But it's a deception. You can't trust nobody in prison. Both prisoners drop dead. It's a draw. At the funeral, Barry gets all of Biderman's money as sole heir. Of course, the money won't fix his heart. But it's $8 million.
Well, I guess that will take out a little of the sting.
Left alone, Barry takes a shovel and digs up Nelson. The chemist has sold him a secret remedy made from bat droppings, which puts him in a stupor for 3 days. Standing at John Leshitsky's grave, Nelson remembers their secret agreement, but he decides not to dig him up. But Barry reminds him that they wouldn't have met without John. The two dig him up. Now they're even. A year later, Nelson and Barry open a winery called Baby Duck. But why does the wine smell like toilet bowl cleaner? That's when the head winemaker comes in. John convinces the critic to give the wine 100 out of 100 points. The crowd is forced to drink it down, but even the owners of the winery don't like the stuff. Hands up, you're under arrest. If you don't want to go to jail, drop a like under this video. Do it now, or you'll have Barry to deal with. Did you like it? Now, subscribe to me. Thank you, my fish.